Though not everyone would agree that Alfred Hitchcock is the greatest film director of all time, he is most certainly masterful in numerous areas of filmmaking. In addition to his ability to visualize entire films before setting foot in the production studio and design a mise-en-scène that supports the narrative seamlessly, some critics credit him for also creating his own method of storytelling and refer to him as the master of the horror genre. Hitchcock was born in London in 1899 and died in 1980. He was drawn to the cinema at an early age and found work in film studios in London and Germany. At age 26, he made his first feature film, The Pleasure Garden. After that, he made 23 more films in Britain. Then when he was about 39 years old, producer David Selznick invited him to come to the U.S., at which time he produced his first American film, Rebecca, in 1940. Here are some movie posters of that film. It is interesting to learn about a person's childhood and to consider how it may set the stage for expressions of themes or development of styles or innovations in adulthood. In the case of Hitchcock, there were a few childhood experiences that seem to have been formative in terms of his personality and his approach to filmmaking. One was that his family life and upbringing was colored by the fact that Hitchcock's father was very strict, which was illustrated by one incident in particular. Hitchcock often told the story of how when he was 4 or 5 years old, his father sent him to the police station with a note. An officer read the note, took the young boy back into the jail and told him, "This is what we do to naughty boys," and locked him up for 10 minutes in a jail cell. This incident not only implemented a lifetime fear of policemen in Hitchcock, but such harsh treatment and wrongful accusations would be found frequently throughout his films. Another influence that Hitchcock was that Hitchcock was educated at a Jesuit preparatory school where a student was severely punished for any deviant behavior. He developed an overwhelming sense of guilt from being Jesuit schooled, which made him afraid of even accidentally committing sins. He developed an intense fear of punishment because of the Jesuits' heavy-handed physical discipline practice. He said, "I was terrified of physical punishment. In those days, it wasn't done casually, you know. It was rather like the execution of the sentence. They would tell you to step in and see father when class was over." Unquote. The boy who was terrified of stepping out of line for fear of punishment grew into a man with a fear of even unwittingly transgressing the authorities, which was a personal issue that became an artistic one. Another influence on Hitchcock's life was the fact that he was raised Catholic in London, which was largely Protestant. He must have felt like an outsider, and indeed always preferred being an observer outside the action rather than being a participant. He also developed a need for control, a fear of authority, a fear of accusation. Together, these issues form the core of Hitchcock's major cinematic themes and characters, such as the wrong man, power and powerlessness, deviance and normalcy. One of the ways in which Hitchcock's need for control was satisfied was being not only a director of films, but one who was meticulous and involved himself with all the aspects of production. For starters, Hitchcock worked closely with the writers of the scripts for as long as it took him to be satisfied. He was known for insisting that the story be told visually rather than verbally as much as possible. So he challenged his writers and demanded that they rewrite until they had achieved that effect. It was during this stage of creative filmmaking process that Hitchcock also visualized the entire film down to the very detail before ever setting foot into the production studio. In addition to his uncanny ability to visualize the entire film before it was shot, it may have been his early training making silent films that contributed to his ability to design and use mise-en-scène to reveal much about characters and their stories before one word was spoken. Also, Hitchcock worked as an art director before becoming a filmmaker, which also gave him a strong sense of mise-en-scène and overall visual design that flawlessly supported the storytelling. French director René Clair said that the style or mise-en-scène that relates so closely to that of the work itself is a situation where the audience will pay no special attention to it. In other words, the stronger the mise-en-scène is synchronized with the story or the narrative, the less the viewer may be aware of it. Such is the case of many Hitchcock films. For example, he masterfully designed the mise-en-scène and cinematography for the first few minutes of Rear Window in a way that reveals a large amount of information about the protagonist, L.B. Jeffries, in a short amount of time. Let's take a look at how he did this. The set for Rear Window was constructed to look like a stage set and was built to the actual size of a 5-story building. It included 31 apartments, 12 of them were fully furnished, and they were all situated around a central courtyard, which was characteristic of Greenwich Village, New York City in the 1950s. The set offered cinematic opportunities for the protagonist, Jeffries, to observe the activities of his neighbors within the courtyard area. Hitchcock included a passageway which you can see down on the lower left, where we can see people walking on the street on the other side of the apartment, which serves to confirm that there is a world outside the courtyard. Hitchcock demonstrates his mastery of mise-en-scène right from the start in Rear Window. When you watch the film, note how the credits roll. As they roll, 3 bamboo blinds rise with the directional flow of the credits. We first see this frame. As you notice, the bamboo shade is raised about halfway. Then we see this frame. These are the curtains Jeffries sees from his apartment window. After this shot, the camera scans the interior of Jeffries' apartment, which is not shown here, but please note that when you watch the film. But within the first few minutes of the film, we learn that this enclosed space embodies a world of differences, different structures, different tenants, different lives. The tenants think they're living in privacy, but through Jeffries' eyes, we see them engaged in private activities. Hitchcock also had a hand in the costume design aspect of the film. He was particularly interested in women's fashions and actually cast actresses such as Grace Kelly because she could wear the dresses that he and the costume designer had selected for the actress to wear in the film. Here are some shots from Rear Window showing the different costume designs worn by Grace Kelly. Hitchcock was also credited by some critics as being the master of suspense. Let's examine cinematic techniques he used to build suspense in his storytelling. In terms of cinematography and editing, Hitchcock is known for implementing what is called the subjective point of view. This means that the editor creates a sequence of shots that serve to align the point of view of the protagonist with that of the camera. And since we as the viewers sees what the camera sees, we are encouraged to also identify with the protagonist. This is achieved by a series of shots that often begin with a medium or close-up that captures the protagonist's facial expressions and eye line, or the direction in which the actor is looking. The next shot reveals what the protagonist is seeing. Then the film cuts back to see the actor's reaction. And this pattern repeats until we, as the viewers, identify with the emotions and events experienced by the protagonist. The way this plays out in terms of building suspense is that we as viewers feel what the protagonist feels because we have been encouraged to identify with the protagonist. Another technique Hitchcock uses to build suspense in films such as Rear Window is a narrative strategy called restricted narration. Restricted narration is a situation where the viewer is encouraged to identify with the protagonist, and then restrictive narration limits the information the story provides the audience as far as what is known by that character. In Rear Window, the pleasure of watching Jeffries unravel a mystery depends on being restricted to his incomplete understanding of the events unfolding outside his window. This approach encourages the audience to identify with the character's perspective when he is experiencing events that are confusing and frightening, in part because he is missing information about the cause of the mysteries. As viewers, we get to participate in the gradual unlocking of the narrative secrets. Another suspense-building strategy Hitchcock uses is to reveal to the audience something that is threatening the protagonist before the protagonist is aware of it. Hitchcock explained the difference between creating surprise and creating suspense when he was having lunch one day with fellow filmmaker François Truffaut. He said, "Let's suppose there is a bomb underneath this table where we are dining, right between us. Nothing happens, then all of a sudden, boom! There is an explosion. The viewer is surprised, but prior to this surprise, it has been an absolutely ordinary scene of no special consequence. Now let's take a suspense situation. The bomb is underneath the table and the public knows it, probably because they have seen it right before this shot. The viewer is aware that the bomb is going to explode at 1 o'clock, and there is a 1 o'clock in the decor. The viewer can see that it is 1:45. In these conditions, this same innocuous conversation becomes fascinating because the viewer is participating in the scene. The audience is longing to warn the characters on the screen, "Hey, you shouldn't be talking about such trivial matters. There's a bomb beneath you and it's about to explode." In this first scene, we have given the audience 15 seconds of surprise at the moment of the explosion. In the second, we have provided them 15 minutes of suspense. The conclusion is that whenever possible, the audience must be informed, except when the surprise is a twist, that is, when the unexpected ending is, in itself, the highlight of the story. End quote. Another theme that also occurs in Hitchcock's films is that of voyeurism. Voyeurism is defined as the practice of or sexual interest in spying on people engaged in intimate behaviors, such as dressing or other actions usually considered to be of a private nature. In Rear Window, given Jeffrey's injury, he is confined to his apartment and passes the time by watching in on the lives of tenants across the courtyard, much like a peeping Tom. By aligning our point of view with Jeffrey's, we as viewers become voyeurs as well. By doing this, Hitchcock is raising questions about the ethics of voyeurism, about human nature, and our fascination with looking, about how, as a society, and especially a media society, we participate in the act of voyeurism on a regular basis.